The whispers in the walls. It was an old house, one of those creaky, sprawling homes tucked away on the edge of town, far enough from the hustle to make it feel isolated. Sarah had always been intrigued by the place, with its ivy-covered exterior and the faded peeling paint that hinted at a long-forgotten history. When she moved in, she was hoping for a fresh start after a rough breakup, and the house was affordable. Too affordable. The first night she stayed there, she thought it was just the house settling. The old beams creaked in protest as she unpacked her things, but something about the noise seemed off, almost deliberate. The sound came from the walls, faint tapping like tiny footsteps skittering behind the plaster. But she shrugged it off. Old houses did strange things. The second night it was worse. As Sarah lay in bed, she heard the faintest whisper, soft but unmistakable. Her breath caught in her throat. She held still, listening. The voice was muffled, like someone was speaking through the walls. The words were too garbled to understand, but the tone was unmistakable, urgent, frantic. She sat up, her heart racing. She crept to the door and into the hallway. The air felt heavy, and the dim light from the single bulb above cast eerie shadows against the wallpaper. The whispering seemed to come from the walls, growing louder, more insistent. The words were now clearer, but she couldn't make sense of them. "Come closer. Help me." Her skin prickled. No one else lived in the house. She was alone. Torn between fear and curiosity, she slowly approached the wall where the sound seemed to be coming from. Her hand hovered above the surface as if she might touch something, someone on the other side. The voice stopped abruptly, then a soft thud, a heavy object being dropped, and then silence. Sarah quickly backed away, heart pounding, her mind racing. She locked the door to her bedroom and tried to ignore the sinking feeling in her chest. But sleep wouldn't come. The night stretched on like a never-ending crawl, filled with a growing sense of dread. By morning, she convinced herself it was just her imagination. After all, it was an old house, but deep down she knew something was wrong. The next day, Sarah went to the town library to search for any information about her new home. The librarian, a graying woman with a watchful gaze, barely looked up as Sarah approached. "Can I help you?" the librarian asked, her voice as dry as the dust that coated the old bookshelves. "I'm looking for any history on the old house on Maple Street," Sarah said, trying to sound casual. "I just moved in." The librarian's expression shifted slightly. "That house? You're the new tenant." Sarah nodded. The librarian lowered her voice as if speaking of something forbidden. "It's not a house anyone should live in. The last tenant, he was a man named Thomas Cartwright. He disappeared without a trace. His wife, well, she didn't last long after that. People say she went mad, started hearing voices in the walls, begging for help. They said it was the spirits of those who died there." "Died?" Sarah's voice caught in her throat. "Who died?" The librarian hesitated. "No one really knows. Some say it was just bad luck. Others say the house is cursed. It's been abandoned a few times, but something always brings people back. They say the voices, they never stop. They're always in the walls, waiting for someone to listen." A cold shiver ran down Sarah's spine. "What happened to the wife?" The librarian didn't answer. She simply turned away, as if the subject were too dangerous to discuss further. Later that night, as Sarah sat in the living room, she tried to shake off the librarian's words. Maybe it was just superstition. But then, as the moonlight filtered through the curtains, she heard it again, the whispering, faint but clear, coming from the walls. This time, the voice was not pleading for help. It was laughing. The laugh was low and guttural, like something inhuman, and it grew louder, more mocking. Sarah stood frozen, her breath shallow, her eyes wide with terror. The walls seemed to pulse with the sound, as though they were alive. The voice came again, but this time it spoke directly to her. "You shouldn't have listened." Suddenly, the wall in front of her cracked open, splintering like old wood, revealing a hollow space behind it. A pair of hands, pale and skeletal, reached out from the darkness. Before she could scream, the hands gripped her arms, pulling her toward the opening, the laughter echoing in her ears. She tried to fight, but the cold grip was too strong, and the wall closed in behind her, trapping her in the dark, suffocating space. The last thing she heard before the darkness consumed her was the whisper, "Now you'll stay with us forever." And from that night on, no one heard Sarah's voice again. Only the whispers in the walls continued, beckoning the next soul to listen.